Yeah, I'm covering, so I need a little bit of room.
Working news, I don't actually. Thanks for having us, man. I appreciate it.
Sure, I hope it works. I'll be really embarrassed if it's working.
I'm going to harm you. Oh, wow. Actually. That one's bad. You know what I did? I gave away my shirt.
Sorry.
Let's see if you have moved around. Thanks so much.
Anybody still needs a pledge for the platform? Here, you know what? Let's do this. Let's just take this down. Brett. You'll be fine right here. Yeah, give me this. You're fine. Okay, 3 minutes.
Yeah, what we've got a candidate there, we've got a candidate there.
Didn't get that good.
Where's the air conditioning?
This is what the press gives.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. I'm Ron. Oh, great. Thank you.
Box 25 covers live.
There's something live on their website and Facebook.
Okay. Okay.
Does the desk know we're up?
And we can still fill in some people back here.
Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank you all for coming. I'm Brooke McGowan. I want to start by telling everyone we love our teachers, we love our kids, we love our neighbors, we love Oklahoma, and we love the Lord, but we've gotten off track in Oklahoma. Oklahoma Taxpayers United is a group of grassroots leaders from around the state who are answering the call from citizens who are asking, what do we do now? They won't listen to us, so what do we do? And today we'll get to that. We appreciate the ability to speak and be heard, but we have lost our representative governance. Oklahoma can be a wonderful place to live and work and raise a family, but currently it's no secret that our institutions lack transparency and honest accounting of their books. They've lost our trust. The bloated agencies, districts, boards, and commissions need serious scrutiny, rather than the solution always being going back to the till, the people of Oklahoma, for the money. At this very moment, powerful interests are demanding that your representatives place an even higher tax burden on you, and the House just did so under cloak and dagger on Monday night. Mismanagement, bloat, and waste have not been, and the ship has run aground. In fact, our governor grants promotions and raises to interlopers who cover up that abuse. And legislative leadership suspends rules and passes bills without time to read them or have been heard from the constituents. We are all sick of it. At the same time, reforms that would lead to lower budgetary needs, such as criminal justice reform or Medicaid fraud investigations, are ignored and stalemated. The very same legislators who campaign against tying our tax base to fluctuating oil and gas prices still look to varying production revenues as a source of fixed income. Have we abandoned all common sense here? Does something happen to elected officials when they walk into the rotunda? Or do we simply just keep electing self-servers more interested in displaying that Sooner spirit instead of the Oklahoma standard, time and time again? Of the 17 state House members who have taken the Taxpayer Protection Pledge, you know, Americans for Tax Reform, Grover Norquist, for their current term of office, only 6 voted this week to uphold that pledge. The Taxpayer Protection Pledge for state legislators simply reads, I, name, pledge to the taxpayers of the state of Oklahoma that I will oppose and vote against any and all efforts to increase taxes. Those 6 oath keepers are Mike Ritzie, Sean Roberts, Jason Murphy, Kevin West, Kevin Calvey, and George Fott. Here are the House pledge breakers on HB 1010XX this week. Earl Sears, Dustin Roberts, Josh Cockcroft, Dennis Casey, Leslie Osborne, Charles Ortega, Mike Sanders, Scooter Park, Randy McDaniel, Chris Kennedy, Michael Rogers, and also State Senator Kim David. She's the Senate sponsor of the bill, so we consider her a pledge breaker too. Also, we want to publicly now thank the Platform Caucus and others who have remained stalwart in their attempt to say no and under the heat to continued onslaught. They keep hearing, we've got to go raise those taxes. We're proud of you. Thank you. Oklahoma Taxpayers Unite is a coalition of grassroots taxpayers that represents the voiceless at the Capitol. Citizens who have spent years calling for government and tax reform. We've had enough of those failed pledges and broken covenants with the good people of Oklahoma. We have all communicated our concerns with our legislators, our governor, and the candidates who visit our doors from time to time. Today, we are releasing a 7-part platform. It's simple. We're also releasing a sacred word of honor pledge. Those are on the billboards, on the easels. We have a group of former and current legislators who support our cause. Please consider joining us, Oklahoma, and encouraging your representative to do the same. I've heard from people all over the state. They are ready for our solutions. Solutions that don't involve taking more. Why would we give the family car to the teenager who just wrecked their own? We invite you to go to our Facebook page, Oklahoma Taxpayers Unite, and our Twitter, @OKTaxpayersUnite, and watch for our website, www.OklahomaTaxpayersUnite.com. Please read our platform, sign your name to it, so we will no longer be voiceless. Together, we can be mighty. Also, we want to invite you to consider serving the people of Oklahoma if your representative has demonstrated their untrustworthiness in this battle. Since the pledge breakers voted for your tax increases before the filing period for state office, which is April 11th through 13th, it is our hope that challengers are ready to oppose them and the rest of the 51 Republicans who voted in favor of the biggest tax increase in nearly 30 years. Any willing candidates out there, we're ready to speak with you. So now I want to turn it over to Ms. Rhonda Villamont-Smith from Tulsa.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Villamont-Smith. I'm a longtime grassroots activist leader, and I'm excited to stand with these activists and leaders from across the state in opposition to burdening the Oklahoma families with more taxes. And before people start saying that we're against teachers or we're against public education, we do support teacher pay raises. However, we believe that these can be achieved without raising taxes on the backs of hardworking Oklahomans. On Monday night, the House of Representatives rushed to pass through the largest tax increase in Oklahoma's 111-year history, HB 1010XX. They did so without auditing and investigating the state agencies for savings and inefficiencies, or finding and eliminating the duplication of services. Many of these very same legislators that voted to raise your taxes ran on transparency, accountability, lower taxes, and reining in the government. Never trust a politician, right? I guess our House leadership thinks that this is Washington, D.C., considering the tactics that were used to get this huge bill passed. The bill was only available to our representatives 1 hour prior to the voting. The ink wasn't even dry on the paper before they voted on HB 1010XX. They suspended their own rules by not allowing the representatives enough time to not only read and understand the bill, but to reach out to their constituents. Upon passage of HB 1010XX, our representatives began to clap and to cheer and to congratulate themselves on breaking the 75% threshold for the first time since 1990, passing tax increases on the backs of you and me. Some of these tax increases are unfair and affect certain class of citizens. So even if they are increasingly unpopular, like smokers, encumbering them with the cost to cover the reckless spending of this legislature is morally wrong. If you are feeling frustrated, we understand, we get it. You're not alone. Citizens grow weary of the constant battle against higher taxes without audits and accountability. We have watched as principled legislators have stood against the force of the government leadership, and we are eternally grateful for their bold stand. They have fought this battle alone. Let us remember, if it weren't for the strength of these legislators to hold firm to their principles, we wouldn't know about the mess with the health department, with the tourism department, or with now the Department of Agriculture. So we say thank you to the Platform Caucus for standing strong so that these things could be revealed, because if not, it was just going to be hidden in plain sight again. The time has come for us once again to take a stand. It's time for us to demand an accounting of our tax dollars, of how our tax dollars are spent, and to hold those accountable that misuse and abuse our hard-earned tax dollars. It is time now to take action. As citizens, we do have options. Citizens have the power to repeal legislation via a veto referendum, which we plan to pursue should HB 1010XX or HB 1033XX or any other burdensome tax increase be passed by the House and Senate and signed into law by the governor. A veto referendum only requires less than 42,000 signatures. And according to the state constitution, and I quote, referendum petitions shall be filed with the Secretary of State not more than 90 days after the final adjournment of the session of the legislature which passed the bill on which the referendum is demanded. The veto power of the governor shall not extend to measures voted on by the people. And that's unquote. A veto referendum will allow these tax increases passed by the legislature to be placed on a ballot for a vote of the people, the way that State Question 640 was intended to work. That's just one option we have. Another is very many of the legislators that voted to raise your taxes are currently running unopposed in their re-election campaigns this year, and we need to correct that. We are currently recruiting candidates that will support and legislate in accordance with the Oklahoma Taxpayer Platform and are willing to sign the Taxpayer Pledge. The time is now for good men and women to stand up and lead our state with principle and conviction. If you or someone that you know would like to run for office or have considered running for office, please reach out to us at OklahomaTaxpayersUnited@gmail.com, or you can reach us on our web.
Unite.
Oh, what did I say? Oklahoma Taxpayers Unite @gmail.com, OklahomaTaxpayersUnite.com, yes. Or on the web, or on the Facebook page. Sorry about that. So remember, you're not alone. Together, joining forces, we can make great things happen, and we can make Oklahoma great. And now I am going to bring to you our great Senator, Coburn. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Appreciate the opportunity to join this. This is a grassroots effort that I didn't start. I want you all to know that. I was invited into it. I think it's necessary. And I would also say to the teachers in Oklahoma, this isn't about you getting more money. This is about the legislature actually doing their job. The oversight that hasn't happened, the waste that hadn't been discovered, the duplication, the funding for tax credits that are undue, the disproportionate benefit to the moneyed interest in this state. As I sat back and saw what happened the first of this week, I said, oh my goodness, Oklahoma's become Washington. And it has. You had the suspension of rules, the lack of the ability to read a bill, the lack of the ability to offer amendments, and the only leadership you had was to spend more and have less responsibility and less transparency in government. So teachers, don't take this as something against you. This is about the leadership that leads Oklahoma. And I would just remind you, the taxes to pay for any increase under this bill are going to come from you and your family. They're going to come from you and your family. And then you ought to ask a question, why don't we have the opportunities in Oklahoma? Why did 2/3 of all the graduates of Oklahoma's university leave Oklahoma? For the very reason that we're seeing what's happening right now, is we haven't created the incentives for lower taxes, for more economic growth, for initiation of business and ease of business growth in our state. And the reason that is because we've had failed leadership. I think you have failed leadership in the House. We'll see if you have failed leadership in the Senate. But leadership matters. So if you're listening to this today, and you actually would like to see a transparent Oklahoma government, not a governor that vetoes transparency bills, if you want to hold legislators accountable for doing what they said they would do, that's a characteristic of virtue. To tell people you can run on a platform and then do something opposite of that is unvirtuous. And it teaches our kids that truth doesn't matter and that your word doesn't matter. And if your word doesn't matter in Oklahoma, nothing else does. So behind me stand people who are interested in actually restoring a transparent, vibrant government that will lead to a transparent, vibrant, growing economy loaded with opportunity and loaded with increased standard of living for every Oklahoman. We don't have to live at the lowest common denominator. We actually can reward excellence. We can applaud wisdom. We can applaud virtue. But what the House did and the moneyed interest behind it is the worst of government. It's not the best. And I am proud of the individuals behind me who stood up and said, wait a minute, there's a whole lot of other ways to pay for a teacher increase than what we've just done. It is easy to pass a tax increase. It's easy to spend other people's money. Milton Friedman got a Nobel Prize for talking about how people spend other people's money. But what needs to happen is a relook at every aspect of Oklahoma's government. Tell me where the oversight hearings have been in Oklahoma this year that looked at the waste, the duplication in our state government. And oh, by the way, there's just 152 lobbyists owned by the state, either through employment or contract, that lobby the state government for more money for the agencies. I can't think of a worse way to spend money. And yet that has not changed. So we have a chance to change it. If you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, and you'd actually like people to tell you the truth, and actually be transparent, and admit when they're wrong, then it's time to change who's here. And if you want to be associated with a group that we're bipartisan, we don't care what your party affiliation is. What we care about is transparency and a future for our kids. And we think education's important. And we think teachers ought to get a raise. But the way you do that is the hard work of oversight and legislative work, not ramming something through, suspending the rules and not giving people a chance to amend. With that, I'd stop and take any question you have. I would note that one of our recommendations is a permanent subcommittee on oversight. It's both bipartisan and bicameral, that has subpoena power, that will actually level the playing field between the legislature and the executive branch in Oklahoma. And only then will we start seeing transparency. And that committee and its staff would operate year-round. And to do that means that you will bring people into that committee and put them under oath, so that we no longer have people from agencies not telling us the full story. And that you've seen how that's happened in a couple of agencies this way. So with that, I'd stop and take any questions that you
Dr.
might have.
Coburn, you've called for new leadership. Is there any chance that you might run for governor of Oklahoma?
No, there's not any chance that I'm going to run for governor of Oklahoma.
We tried.
Are you going to make an endorsement in that race?
Not yet.
Who are your top?
I don't have any tops right now.
How do you propose teachers get a raise now? They're getting a raise now. How do you propose to get one if you don't pay taxes?
Well, it's not about, how about eliminating expenses? How about $70 million of money that goes to the wind industry through a tax credit that goes out of the state every year? Why would we continue to do that? What about a Medicare eligibility audit? Won't take but 2 months. And what about eliminating duplication? What about transparency on how much money we get from the federal government? The governor won't even share that with the legislature. How's it spent? Is there any waste or inefficiency there? Are there ways for us to find money to give teachers? Absolutely. There's a lot. If you talk to Senator Josh Burkeen, he's proposed areas that'll give us about $150 million. The 70 million. It's easy to come up with 400 or 500 million. The tax bill they passed, only 60% of it's going to teachers right now. So, and by the way, the revenue estimates coming in for the state are much higher than what we expected. So we're not going to have a deficit. We're going to have a surplus this year. And yet we're raising taxes $200 million more than required to give teachers a raise. Where's the oversight on the number of state employees that we have and how efficient it is? The average Oklahoma university in our state's cost for administrative costs is 70% higher than the national average. Where's our oversight hearing on that? Why are we spending that much money? I mean, there's lots of areas where we can go and find the money, and that's not a problem. The question is, do you have the leadership that will go and do it?
Yeah.
And that's my complaint.
Do you think there are too many school districts? Do you think there needs to be a lot of consolidation?
I think you can consolidate the management without consolidating the school district. And I think you can save a ton of money. And you can still give an identity to every community for their schools. So if you look at Muskogee, how many school districts we have? You have the river going down, you divide Weber's Falls and Gore. You got a superintendent vote. Tell me why.
Senator, you talked about the moneyed interests benefiting from the bill that passed the House and being considered by the Senate. On the flip side of that, the state's largest oil and gas associations, tobacco companies, were just among a few who, I would say, moneyed interests who opposed that. So what moneyed interests are you talking about? That
how about the fact that we give all the tax money collected on tribal sale cigarettes back to the tribes? That's a moneyed interest. They're gaining on that. We should take that away.
So the tribes are an example of a moneyed interest?
Well, I'm just saying, I can give you, if you want to sit down, I'll be happy to talk to you in private on what I've heard and what I've seen.
Well, I mean, but what are the moneyed interests?
I'm not going to degrade anybody, but there are moneyed interests in Oklahoma that want to not shrink the size of government, but want to expand the size of government.
Right, but you're at a press conference and you said these moneyed interests exist. I mean, who are you talking about?
Well, you have moneyed interests. I think they're the people that are associated that tried to do the Step Up program want to raise taxes, didn't they? All right. So those are the moneyed interests that want to raise taxes rather than cut expenses. Why can't we cut? Why can't we lessen the burden of government on Oklahoma citizens? We can. We just don't have the leadership that's willing to do it. It's hard work. I've been there.
Thank you.
Dr. Coburn, we've had years of state budget cuts, so I'm a little bit curious as to how you feel about that.
I think everything ought to be a zero-based budgeting. You start, here's what our job is, here's what our goal is, here's what it should cost to get there. You're coming from a point as it's been cut. The question is how efficient are you in terms of delivering that service, and is it a service that the state should be in versus not? So everything ought to be questioned. When was the last time you had a complete review of the programs in Oklahoma? The answer to that is never. When was the last time you had transparency in the state government? Never. Why don't we get that? Let's have that. Let's let Oklahomans see how their money is spent. You can't find out. The legislature can't find out.
When you talk about transparency, and how the bill went down in the House. What do you favor? Subjecting the legislature to the Open Meetings and Open Records Act?
No, I'm talking about transparency that was passed and the governor vetoed. It puts every dollar that Oklahoma spends on a website so every Oklahoman can see it. And all you have to do is, we're doing that at the federal government level now. It's called openthebooks.com. You can go find out everybody that gets any money from the federal government other than their Medicare, Medicaid, or welfare money. So why shouldn't Oklahomans know how their money's spent?
How has that stopped federal government spending on the website?
Well, but that's a different issue. The fact is it's there, and things are being exposed. The other thing I would tell you is this is a Drummond law state, and you might go look that up and see what that means, because what that means is people are spending money that they have no authority to spend.
Senator, when you talk about the zero-based budgeting, is there also maybe a need to review the way the taxes are assessed, or the way that it's structured here? I mean, I think there was a legitimate reason back several years ago to give a 1% tax rate to GPT for horizontal drilling.
I don't know. I haven't looked at the history of it.
When you're in D.C., you talked a lot about the need to review deductions that
Sure.
huge money, cost the Treasury a lot of money. They do a lot of these incentives that have the same effect here.
I think what we ought to do is go copy people that are doing it well. And I think Texas is beating our socks off economically. And I think what the best compliment we could give them is start copying. And if we were to copy what they're doing economically, every Oklahoman would benefit. Again, I'm gonna stop taking questions now, and I'm gonna say one more time: if you have had it with the lack of transparency, the lack of responsiveness, and lack of leadership in Oklahoma, and the Lord's calling you to run in a race, it's time for you to stand up and be a part of changing Oklahoma, making it the transparent, great state it can be, and not allowing the kind of tricks that we've seen here under Republican leadership this last week to continue.